the crypto ETF magic trick that nobody's watching. Welcome back, everybody. Something massive is happening in the crypto market right now, and most people are staring at the wrong hand. And that is how every great magic trick works, by the way. The magician makes you look over here, while the real move is happening over here. And right now, the market is everybody staring at Bitcoin and Ethereum. Now, Bitcoin's under massive pressure. Ethereum's under pressure. ETF money is moving. Leverage is getting flushed. Headlines are screaming fear, and everybody's asking whether the two biggest crypto assets are losing steam right now. But while the crowd is watching Bitcoin and Ethereum bleed, XRP is quietly building one of the most important setups in the entire digital asset market has ever seen. And I'm not just talking about one trade. I'm talking about the entire financial revolution. Because if this plays out the way I believe it can, XRP is not just another asset catching inflows. XRP becomes the bridge. And the bridge between banks and blockchain, the bridge between fiat and stablecoins, the bridge between tokenized assets and global liquidity, the bridge between the old financial system and the new digital economy. And that's the part most people are totally missing. They think this is about price, but it's not. It's about positioning. And I can't say that enough. Now let's look at the numbers. Over the last couple of weeks, Bitcoin ETFs have been hit hard. US spot Bitcoin ETFs reported shed of more than 1.7 billion. And that's just since May 7th, with one of the biggest single day withdrawals coming in at $648 million of outflows. Another report showed that Bitcoin ETFs posted roughly 1.3 billion in net outflows for the week ending in May 23rd. That's the worst week since late January. And that's not small money. That's not retail panic. That is institutional capital moving. Then let's look at Ethereum. Ethereum ETFs were also massively under pressure, reporting extended outflow streak of 10 straight days, with more than 360 million pulled cumulatively. On May 18th alone, Ethereum ETFs reported saw an $86 million net outflow. So Bitcoin's bleeding, Ethereum's bleeding, and everybody's watching the same two giants. But now, let's look on the other hand, XRP. XRP ETFs pulled in roughly $60 million of inflows on May 15th alone, and $22 million on May 22nd. That's the largest daily inflow since early January, bringing cumulative flows to around $1.41 billion. Then XRP ETFs posted that it was described as the strongest week of 2006, with about 80 million in inflows, while Bitcoin and Ethereum were dealing with massive outflow pressure. And as of May 25th, XRP ETF tracker showed around 1.4 billion in AUM. 7 active XRP ETFs, that's about plus $904 million locked in ETF vaults. So ask yourself the real question. Why is nobody talking about this? Bitcoin ETFs are losing hundreds of millions, and Ethereum's ETFs are stuck in redemptions, and XRP is quietly pulling in money, locking supply, building a complete different flow profile. That is the magic trick. Everyone is watching the fear in Bitcoin and Ethereum, while XRP is starting to look like an asset preparing for the next phase of institutional rotation. But this is bigger than ETF flows. This is the key. ETF flows are not the revolution. They are the clue. They are the smoke before the fire, because XRP's real story is not about money that may be rotating into it. Not at all. The real story is why money could rotate into XRP and the reasoning behind it. XRP is kind of has the setup that most assets dream of. Regulatory clarity, ETFs access, CME futures, Ripple's acquisition of Hidden Road, Ripple's acquisition of Rail, RLUSD, tokenized money market funds, stablecoin rails, cross-border payment infrastructure, institutional liquidity, and XRP ledgers sitting in the middle of the world moving towards tokenized finance. That's not a meme narrative. That's not a hype narrative. That's a bridge currency narrative. This is the play. This is the magic trick. Because the future financial system is not going to run on one isolated asset. It's going to need connections. And it's going to need liquidity between fiat currencies, stable coins, CBDCs, tokenized funds, banks, exchanges, institutions, payment corridors, and real world assets. That is where XRP becomes powerful. Bitcoin is a digital scarcity. Ethereum is a sort of looked at programmable finance. But XRP is positioned as the bridge asset for global value of movement. Period. That is the lane. That is the play, and that is the setup. And this is why I believe that people are sleeping on what's actually happened. They think Bitcoin outflows are just bearish. They think of Ethereum outflows are, weakness. But if you actually look at the early stage of capital looking for the next major institutional story. So what if money is leaving crowded trades and starting to search for the next liquidity asset? What if Bitcoin had its institutional moment? Ethereum had its smart contract moment. And now XRP is lining up for its bridge currency moment. That is the question. And if you understand market, you know that capital doesn't sit. It moves, it rotates, it hides before it reveals itself. It positions before the headline arrives, and by the time mainstream finally admits what's happening, the first major move is usually undergone. And that is why this moment matters. Because XRP is not sitting there waiting for hype. It's sitting at the intersection of everything the new financial system needs. Stablecoins need movement. Tokenized assets need settlement. Banks need liquidity. And institutions need compliant rails. Global payments need speed. Cross-border finance needs a bridge. And XRP was built for that exact conversation. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying Bitcoin is finished, and I'm not saying that Ethereum is done and over. That's not the point. Bitcoin and Ethereum are still giants, but markets rotate, leadership changes, narratives evolve, and the biggest opportunities often show up when everybody's obsessed with yesterday's winners. That's where XRP becomes dangerous, because XRP doesn't need to be Bitcoin. It doesn't need to be Ethereum. It needs to be what the world is missing: a neutral bridge for liquidity, a settlement asset to move value, a connector corridor between the old system and the new system. So that's the story and how it gets so much bigger than a 2-week inflow chart. The inflows are just a signal. The real story is that XRP may be positioning itself as the world bridge currency for the next era of finance. And if that does happen, the price conversation changes completely. Because then XRP is no longer being valued like a sleepy altcoin, and it's being valued like infrastructure. And when infrastructure becomes essential and it's being used, markets don't price politely. They reprice it violently. So here's the magic trick. They have you watching Bitcoin outflows, right? They have you watching Ethereum basically collapse. They have you watching fear. It's everywhere. They have you watching the hand that they want you to watch. But the real move may be happening somewhere else. In XRP flows, the locked ETF supply, in Ripple's infrastructure acquisitions, in stablecoin rails, in tokenized assets, in institutional settlement, in the quiet formation of a bridge currency narrative that could define the next stage of crypto. So that's what I'm watching, because the next financial revolution will not be around holding digital assets. It'll be about moving value across the world instantly. It'll be about connecting currencies, banks, stablecoins, tokenized assets, and liquidity pools. It'll be about replacing slow, broken financial pipes with faster digital rails. And XRP is one of the few assets built directly for that mission, not Bitcoin. So no, I'm not looking at XRP like another altcoin. I never was. I'm looking at XRP like the loaded bridge asset between two worlds: the old financial system on one side and the new digital economy on the other side. And if liquidity starts moving across that bridge at scale, then people are laughing today, maybe the same people chasing tomorrow. So here is my take. Bitcoin is bleeding ETF money. Ethereum's under pressure. XRP is quietly showing inflows. Supply lockups, institutional positioning that may look small to the average investor. But to me, it looks like the early stage of something much bigger and a massive rotation. Not just into another crypto asset, into an asset that may become the bridge currency of the new world financial system. And if I'm right, This is the part of the story that people look back and say, how do we not see it? The answer is simple, because you're watching the wrong hand. Because while everyone was staring at Bitcoin and Ethereum, XRP was quietly stepping into position. And when the world finally realized what XRP is positioned to become, this little inflow story may look like the spark before the true revolution. Till the next time, X Finance Bull.